My name is Irena Swanson, and today I want to show you how to make maple leaf blocks very fast, accurately, and efficiently, both in terms of fabric usage and your own time. For example, I made these 24 blocks yesterday in 5 hours and 40 minutes. That's very fast. I will show you how to make the 24 block version. For example, this is in the making, or the 8 block version using fat quarters. In any case, you should choose non-directional fabrics because the half square triangle blocks and the stem blocks are cut on bias and the other blocks are on the straight of grain. For the 24 block version, your fabrics need to be at least 43 inches wide, preferably 44, and you need 2 1/4 yard of the dark fabrics and 1 3/4 yard of the light fabrics. For the half square triangle blocks, you need to cut 8 strips of dark fabrics and 8 strips of light fabrics at strip width 3 3/4 inch. For the stem fabrics, you need to cut 4 strips of dark fabrics at strip width 1.5 inches, and you need to cut 5 light strips of width 3 1/8 inch. And then for the solid blocks, notice that I do not put an extra seam here. For the solid blocks, in any case, you need 8 strips of width 4.5 inches and 3, so this is 8 dark strips and 3 light strips of the same width, 4.5 inches. Actually, I take 4.5 and 1/32 of an inch just to guarantee that this will be 4.5 inches, 4 inches wide in the final version. In the fat quarter version, I will show you how to do the cutting. You will need 4 dark fat quarters, and in each you cut 2 strips for the half square triangle, so width 3 3/4 inch. Then for the solid parts, you need 1 of 4.5 inches wide and 9 inches extra also of 4.5 inches wide. And then you need 4 strips of width 1.5 inches in length, 7, actually 6.5 would do, but 7 just to give you a little more room. Here maybe this is not enough, I can't squeeze 2 in, so maybe one of my 4 stems will have to be pieced, or maybe from the leftovers I can get another 1.5 by 7 inches wide. So this is fat quarter version in the dark quarters, and then in the lights, again for the half square triangles, you need 2 strips at 3 3/4 inch. You need 1 9-inch long, or more than 9-inch long, but 4.5 inches wide. And then this one here is 3 1/6 inch, and then this is leftovers, and possibly you may, if you didn't have enough here, you can use that. So, for either case, you cut 8 dark and 8 light strips. In the fat quarter version, or in both cases, take 4 dark and 4 lights and sew them together, and stacking them, this height here is 3 1/4 inch. So this gives approximately 45-degree angle. It's not necessary that you're very accurate now, but do press the seams, it doesn't matter which way. And then with the remaining 4 dark and 4 light strips, you have to stack the fat quarters, the strips, the other 45-degree angle. So this is again 3 1/4 inch. And over here, some of the triangle, half square triangles will have yellow and red, so you better have yellow and red adjacent here, and so on, yellow and brown, yellow and brown. So repeat the colors or flip them around. Okay. After you press all the seams, then you make an accurate 45-degree cut. These are leftovers, discard, not very much waste here, huh? But then the 2 outside strips here, they have edges without partners. So you want to take this edge here and that edge, the bottom edge here, sew them together. When you sew them together, the seaming is straight, but there will be, so this is maybe the last seam, the seaming is straight, but there is some twisting of the construction. When you release that seam and press it, already pressed it inside out, you get what I call a primary wide tube. Because this was made from fat quarters or approximations of fat quarters, these primary wide tubes are not very wide. So one slant of 45-degree angles gives you this, the other one gives you that. And then from these primary wide tubes, we cut out primary narrow tubes of width 4.5 plus a tad of an inch. And out of fat quarters, you only get 2 primary narrow tubes. You get almost 3, but that means you get 2. From the 44-inch, so much longer strips, twice as long strips, you actually get 3 times as many primary narrow tubes. How is that possible? Well, you don't double the waste when you make the strips longer. So it's much better, more efficient use of fabrics if you use longer strips. So 44 inches is important. Okay, so you have your primary narrow tubes. And this here will now also explain why I do not have 24 of these strips, but these blocks, but only 16, because some of my strips were not long enough, so the 6th tube is not quite long. But anyway, ignoring that this is not quite wide, this is how the primary narrow tubes were cut apart. And then the idea is, we're still building half-square triangle rows. You want to have a row of just one color. So here it's purple, gray, and so on. So you want to line them up. So if you've seen my previous videos of half-square triangles, when I sew these together, I go point to point. But here, because of the way things mesh together, I think it's better if instead of just point to point, you take the 2 pieces that have duller angles, so not these 2, but these 2, and you want to overlap them more. So you slide this one down by a 1/16 of an inch, not very much, just a 1/16 of an inch. I'm exaggerating here so you can see, so that these 2 can overlap more. And then you take this tube, you go to the sewing machine, flip it over. Again, you don't sew on 2 layers of the tube, you just sew these 2 tubes together. This seam comes up, the other seam comes down the other way, and they should come together at the edge, except this one on top is shifted down by a 1/16 of an inch. Yeah. And because I chose 4 darks and 4 lights, this tube has a really pleasant circumference. It's not too big, too unwieldy, and it's not too small that it would be hard to sew. This is just almost the same as sewing on a flat. So again, match up, almost match up, but a 1/16 of an inch down on these. Now for the other slant, it's not down, but it's up. Namely, here I already adjusted them. So here are the pointier angles, here are the duller angles, and these 2 have to overlap a 1/16 of an inch, so this one gets shifted up by a 1/16 of an inch. And then you sew them together. And then what you get is something like this. You press the latest seam. Be careful because these edges are in bias. And then by design, this gap here is a 1/2 of an inch plus a 1/16. Right. And then you start cutting through these middles, and you can see that we are building rows, double rows of half-square triangles, and these will go here. Yeah. Similarly, you deal with the other half-square triangles, rows of those, and here they're already cut apart. Here, these ones. Okay. And now we want to sew these to the solid part here. So don't cut the solid parts out. Take take one of those long strips of width 4.5 inches, and you sew these double rows, these 4 units of 4 half square triangles onto them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fit on one of the strips. And then once they are sewn, you press this latest seam and cut out between them. So here's one already cut out, and I have a loose version over here, which I will put here. So this is one of the units. Next, we want to make these columns, the other half square triangles. So you take a light strip of width 4.5 inches. You sew the other triangle units on, not the long way, but the short way, pointed this way. And once it's sewn, you press the latest seam, and then you cut them apart. Here I already have one. And then we get to working on the stems. Okay. So for the stems, you started with some strips of dark fabrics of width 1.5 inches and some strips of light fabrics of width 3.1/8 inch. You cut these dark fabrics into 7 inches. Actually 6.5 inches suffices, but just to make it comfortable, 7 inches, 7 inches. And when you sew the two together, keep like a 1/2 inch gap between them. And then sew the next one, and a 1/2 inch gap, and sew the next one, and so on until you can't fit anymore. Then, once it's sewn, you press these seams open. So here they're pressed open. And then you take a ruler that has a 45-degree angle from the right angle. And what you want to do is stick the tip here to the tip of the white in the gap here. And don't make it like this, slanted, make it straight, possibly give yourself some tape to make sure you're doing it straight. And then cut here and cut there. And similarly cut there. There's no point in cutting that way here. So you cut these, and then you take these cut out triangles and you take them to the top and center them on the red fabric and flip them over and sew, and then press open. So that's what we get down here. And similarly, this is what the latest seam. And then you take your right angle 45-degree mark ruler again, and what you want to do is that 45-degree line should, you eyeball it, should go down the center of this dark strip. And you want to make sure that you can see that this is sufficiently over so that you can see the 4.5 inch lines here. So once you're satisfied, then do the cuts. Once this is trimmed, you go the other way, also do the 4.5 inch square and cut the other two edges here, and you get the stem blocks. And here's a stem block. Now position stem this way rather than the other way, right? And now when you have enough of these stems, when you sew them all together, then you take the remaining dark strips of 4.5 inches wide, sew these stem blocks onto them, and then after you press the seam, cut along, and then what you get is this. And then in the final steps, you make this seam here, press the seam up, and then one more seam, press this unit to that unit. By design, in half of your units like this seam here will be automatically pressed up, and in half of them it will be pressed down. So before making the final seam, repress some of the seams so that the seam allowances go pointed down. And that makes the 24 or 8 blocks very easily, very fast. Please visit my www.tubepiecing.com.